Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 168. Today on the podcast, Jen interviews Jon DeWaal about how career transitions produce the best kind of life transitions. Except if you plan to change your career and become a superhero, you'll want to think ahead about how you're going to pay your bills. Those people never seem to get paid for saving the world.
Have you just been downsized? Or have you lost your job for a different reason? Maybe you were fired, maybe you were let go, maybe there was some reason that you had to change careers, change positions. Are you feeling lost? Are you not sure what to do or who to talk to? If this describes you, then today's episode is all about transition. And as hard as it is to believe right now, transition is a big opportunity. As some of you know, and before I turn you over to the podcast, I was downsized myself a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now, depending on when you're listening to this show, and it was terrible. It was a department downsize. A few of us were laid off. There was a lot of anger, a lot of upset, a lot of hurt, a lot of yucky feelings, a lot of pain and stress associated with it. And now I'm happy to say that it was actually, the situation wasn't good, but the result has been amazing. So I fully believe in what my next guest is going to talk to us about today. You're listening to Jen Swanson, Careers by Jen. This is a podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. And now I want to share with you Jon DeWaal. He is the Executive Director, Transition Specialist, and Learning Facilitator at Liminal Space, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping others find the courage and the means to navigate major life transition. He spends his days guiding one-to-one transition coaching and counseling sessions, leading transition groups called peer groups, P-I-E-R, and facilitating learning workshops that teach transitional skills at the Peer Learning Center at Liminal Space. Jon is also a podcaster. He is the host of a weekly podcast called Life Through Transitions, where each episode aims to help listeners create forward momentum by embracing life's most formative inflection points and the immense growth and transformation that they invite. And our show today is talking about how the biggest transitions in your life can also be the biggest opportunities. So here is my conversation with Jon DeWaal. So today I'd like to welcome my special guest, Jon DeWaal. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jen. It's good to be here.
It's great. We connected through a friend of yours who was a guest on our show a while back. And as we were chatting, he said, "You have to meet Jon." And so we thank Ron for that. That was great. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to get talking about transitions and transformation. But before we do that, would you tell us a little bit about what it is you do and how you came to be doing what you do?
Yeah. So the organization that I'm a part of, that I founded, we're on year 10, I think, since inception. So it's amazing to say that. It's called Liminal Space. And we help people navigate major life transitions, and really transitions of all kinds, everything from early career transitions to mid-career, stages of life, such as building a new life after a divorce, empty nesting, kids are gone, what do I do next? Or preparing for retirement. Really run the full gamut of those different kinds of transitions. And it's really a blend of counseling, coaching, and for many of our clients to have faith, those faith questions into the process, as those are often stirred up during transition. So, if I had a metaphor that I use, it's Sherpa. I get to be a Sherpa with folks. They have their mountain to climb. I've climbed it before, or at least I know the terrain well enough to go with them, alongside them, and carry some of the stuff that they can't carry themselves, especially hope. Hope is challenging for many people when they're going through these kinds of major life transitions. So how I got into it, a number of years ago, I used to be a contractor, of all things. Had my own commercial and residential painting company. I had a crew of guys working for me, and we were nearing the end of a long summer, working many long hours, because in the Pacific Northwest, you have a small window of time to really make your money.
Yep, I know that.
And so it was that last exterior paint job that we were doing, and I took the lead on the sprayer that day, and found myself pretty quickly into the job, deciding that it was time to call it quits and not work on the roof because it was slippery. It had rained the day before. And as I was getting down off of the roof, a shingle, one of those cedar shingles, broke and slipped out from underneath my feet. And I slid right off the roof and onto concrete. I landed on my feet. But as I stood up, there just wasn't anything there in that right ankle. And what resulted, to make quite a long story shorter, was a 2-week stay at Harborview and 3 surgeries to kind of put all those things in that ankle back together. And many long nights for the next 4 or 5 months on a couch, sitting with a leg up, asking a lot of questions regarding where is my life going? Because it wasn't what I wanted to do long term, being a contractor, but it was a means to an end, and providing for my family. So I think with that traumatic experience and how it disrupted so much of my family's life and my career and everything really in life. We had a 4-month-old at the time and a 2.5-month-old at the time. I mean, it just sent ripples through our life. But when I look back on it now, the things that it rippled were some bigger questions related to what I really wanted in my life. And it really, in that disruption, started a significant career transition for me to really say, like, this isn't what I want for sure. Then what do I want? And that first night, articulating that already to a dear friend, actually Ron, who you interviewed, saying like, this is not what I want. And so began the conversation of really exploring that. And it led me to do a number of exercises and searching and digging myself into my own story through help. Certainly didn't do that on my own. And out of that searching process in my transition, what resulted was this desire to work with people moving through significant life transitions. And some of that work had already been done prior to me falling off that roof, but it was the injury that really accelerated that process. To say, I'm going to take a leap of faith and move towards something that I think is going to be a better fit for my future, and launch something that at the time I really hadn't a clue exactly what I was birthing. Kind of like when you have kids, you have no idea who they're going to become, but you do it and you learn along the way.
Exactly.
And that's what I did with Liminal Space. I birthed something and learned along the way. Yeah, so I worked with people and provided them tools, offered them insights, did a number of things that I knew how to do, along with some help that was offered to me, some consultation to help them move through these seasons of their life, having to do with career, many of them, a lot of job and career discontent, mostly people that could name what they don't want to do, but not what they really want to do, and need help to figure that out. So it just began, very, very small, and grew over the years to working with a full, set of individuals, and then couples, and doing some groups and classes. And now we have a learning center where we do workshops and a whole number of different kind of offerings that are all designed to help people navigate change. So that's a long story in a very short period of time.
But what a story. And it
Yes.
leads perfectly into our topic, which is how career transitions produce the best kind of life transformation. And so you've lived that, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps provide some credibility for sure when I ask someone to go do some homework in a particular area of their life, go dig up a story, or go have this conversation that I really want you to have, or go answer these questions or interview these people, or whatever it may be that I'm asking them to do. Like, I'm asking them to do it, and I've done it myself. And I may not have gone through the particularity of exactly that transition they're in, but I've done the labor to really, identify the clues and follow them within that transition. So yeah, for sure.
It's one thing to look at it in retrospect and to see how all the puzzle pieces fit together and how this led to that, led to that, led to that, to where you are
Yep.
now. But when you're in the midst of it, when you're at the beginning of it, it's not easy to see how it all unfolds, is it?
It is not. And I think that kind of perspective, I was just talking with my wife about this the other night as we were thinking about some of the areas that we're in transition in and how things feel really hard in those things that we're trying to see some movement in. And in the midst of that, having young kids and to keep that perspective of recognizing this is probably likely building towards something. And we can at times see glimpses of that. But in the day to day, that can feel rather long and challenging. It's harder to see, which I think that one point of, again and again, I say this to people, it's probably the thing I preach the most, is you are not designed as a person to go through transition by yourself. You just simply are not. And I think that's what I love about the heart of these kinds of things that you're doing, Jen, with these podcasts and continuing the conversation of helping people find traction in their careers, is you need help managing that. You need help getting through it. And so that's just been such a significant force for me and for those that I work with to help make sense of all of the stuff that's getting disrupted as a result of change. And I think early on when I'm talking with people, that's such a huge thing to make a distinguishment between change and transition.
So what's the distinction? What's your definition of that?
So, sometimes change is brought on by choices we make or forces or choices that others make that can get imposed upon our life. But it's often something that's happening externally through our efforts or through others, and things that are sometimes in our control or out of our control. But it's an external thing that's happening in our life. It's the promotion. It's the moving to a new city. I just literally an hour ago spoke with a lady who moved from New Zealand over to the Pacific Northwest, and that's a huge change.
No kidding.
So it's all of these kind of external things. It's the divorce, it's having kids, it's, a new company, a new job, a job loss. The transition is the process of understanding the change. It's the internalizing, it's the metabolizing of what does the change mean for my life as I move forward. And many people, I think, get stuck in certain kinds of questions, like all of the why questions. Why did I lose my job? Why did I get promoted? Why did they choose me? Why? And they're all helpful. It helps contribute to understanding. But I think, as I think about my own transitions, I'm really trying to understand the now what. When I fell off that roof, now what? Like, what are the future I thought was there isn't. How do I move forward? Now what? And that's really, I think, where people get stuck. And would more often than not take the closest, most available, most easy to find answer to get out of the discomfort of the transition than to learn how to stay in it. And staying in it is a discipline. It's a learned discipline. It's something that you manage. And that's really what I help and teach people, is how to make sense of the change and stay in it as long as you need to in order to become the person that the transition is inviting. And that's just not something that we should be doing on our own.
And that's often the challenge, is because we're people who want to fix stuff, right?
Yes.
You've got a problem. You want, okay. Now what? Now we have A, B, or C options, and let's, we need money, so let's. But the transformation piece is I think, as you said, deeper, and it's about your why, your purpose.
Yes.
So not why did this happen to me, but why am I here? And what is my purpose, or how can I best use all the things that I have, the gifts, the skills, the experience, the life that I've led up until this point, and how can I take all of that and package it, not even package it. I talk that way when I'm looking at helping people find other jobs in career transition, but how can you take all of that and put it to its best use in a way that will make you fulfilled? Right?
Yep. And yeah, fulfilled. I think, that brings me back to a core truth that I believe is inherent for every human being, that we were not designed to lead boring, dull stories. And that is irregardless of the circumstances. And I don't care what it is that you've gone through or experienced, or what kind of loss and pain that you've gone through, career or otherwise. Regardless, or even in spite of the circumstances, you were designed to live a life that has some element of fullness to it. And I think a great example to me that just serves as a continual reminder, one of my favorite stories to tell is a client of mine. Her name is Jessie. She, I think we're about 5 years now from an experience that happened to her where she was in a car traveling with her family on vacation over the mountains towards Leavenworth, which is a small little mountain town here in the Pacific Northwest. And as they were driving, a tree fell on their car and instantly killed both of her parents.
Oh my gosh.
And paralyzed her.
Wow.
So that's traumatic in and of itself, but even more, I think a part of the loss is compounded by the fact that she was a school teacher and loved what she was doing. In her mid-20s, being able to say, I love teaching and I want to do this for the rest of my life. So she lost her parents, she lost her career, she lost her ability to do just about anything with her body, and had to do that hard labor of literally figuring out how to stay alive, how to feed herself, how to clothe herself, how to ask for help in ways that she's never had to ask. Now that's an extreme example, but and we all don't have that kind of story. But the kinds of questions she's asking in the midst of that transition, she rolled into my office that first day and said, this is what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Now I want to build a life. What life can I have given the circumstances? And it immediately we set out to create a conversation to explore that. What kind of meaning can I have given the story I have now? I refuse to believe that my story is simply just about staying alive. I want to learn how to live and live well. And now she's continuing to teach. She found out through our process that she can't do full-time classroom work because it's just too challenging for her body, but was able to articulate her love of travel. And that's still true today. And in spite of the fact that she does a lot of travel within her chair, and she has found ways to push through those boundaries and limitations, many of which she's imposed upon herself through her mindset, and discover parts of this world that she never thought possible, and learn things about other cultures and people, but more importantly about herself and what she's capable of. And now she's working to inspire others to do the same kind of thing through travel, experience the same kind of transformation that she's experienced through travel, inspiring people to do that. And that's just one of other things she's doing. She's launched a business that has to do with drinking beer while you take your dog with you to this pub, which I just love the concept of. And so dating, doing that, there's just so many things that she's doing to build a life, and that's in spite of her circumstances. So the thing I think that just happens, no matter how intense the change that you've gone through, is it just disrupts meaning in a big way. And it's that work of now how do I shape a story that's meaningful moving forward? And that's where the real work lies. And that's where the real challenge is and why I think so many people avoid it and get out of it. So, yeah.
And that's very young to figure that out, because for a lot of people, for a lot of us,
Right.
it's not until much later in life that you have to face up against some of these challenges. And I like the saying, life happens for us, not to us.
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard that before,
Mm-hmm.
but I like that saying, because it helps me to reframe the "why did this happen to me" question.
Yep.
And if
Completely.
it's about self-awareness and self-learning, which I always talk about, and I firmly believe that is,
Mm-hmm.
that, as you said, it's about learning about yourself so that you can be the best you can be.
Right. Yeah. And where would all of that work be if it hadn't been for the change? Right. When I think about the questions that get stirred up in my own life when I go through transition, and the ones that I've been through, where would those questions be? They might be humming in the background of a day, but we all lead such busy lives that they're easy to ignore, right? Unless you're a really intentional person and you are actively thinking about how to create momentum towards the things that you want for your career. A lot of people, the vast majority, I think those questions that gnaw at us stay somewhat dormant until something happens that disrupts the story, creates a wobble, and invites those questions in a way that makes us more alert to them, even in the pain. And that's the gift. I think part of the gift of transition is you're now awake to questions that are important, worth asking more of, and not letting go back underground, and following those clues that the questions are inviting. And again, I think that's true for career or any other kind of transition that you're moving through. And those better questions, I think, lead to the kind of person you might want to become.
So how do you get to that point after something happens, where you are able to then ask those questions rather than finding somebody to blame, something to scapegoat, something to pin this awful thing that's happened to you on? How do you get from that mindset to the questions?
I think for myself, and when working with folks, I take them back to where it all began, the change. So, you lost your job, or you got promoted into a position that you feel is at an elevation you're not familiar with, and everyone's looking to you to lead, and you're inside thinking, I don't know how to do this. I've not led at this level before, and you're looking for help. I don't know how to find that at that new elevation. I have a friend that talks about that when you lead at a new level, and it's almost like there's a oxygen. You're not used to the oxygen levels at that higher level, and learning how to do that. Well, I think it starts by examining really what's different now. Why was it meaningful, the thing that you used to be doing, or the job that you used to have, or the position you used to hold, whatever it was in your career that you're now dealing with that has it's no longer there, right? It's ended. So another word for change is ending. Examining the point in the story where things shifted, and how did that become meaningful to you? So for the clients that have gone through a job loss or a retirement, even tell me what has been so powerful or impactful about this position and this season of your life where you've given a number of years to this company or this organization. Tell me about some of your best moments. What are you going to miss most about that? And I think that work that people are doing in those conversations is really helping them connect thoughts to feelings, bridging that gap between our head and our hearts, and making some really powerful connections that allow them to, in many ways, grieve and force honesty about what's possible and what's not, accepting what's true, and in some ways loosening their grip on what could be possible moving forward, and what might be holding them back to get there. And that's just work that if you don't do, for many people, it just creates something of a cul-de-sac in their life, right? I call that a transition deficit, where they've not stepped into really the work of ending and ending well. And sometimes I've worked with people who are in their 50s, and the ending that they're still struggling to accept happened 30 years ago during college, when a professor told them, "You're never going to be that, so just stop." And how to take them back there and have them name what happened in their story and why it was impactful and why it was meaningful. That's work that most of us don't know how to do or don't want to do. But I think that's part of what it means to get to a new beginning.
And I'm glad you brought up that grieving point, because I was going to ask about that. It's the same when you've lost a loved one. I mean, you have to go through that process and feel all those feelings of the grief cycle to then be able to even think about how you're going to move forward. And so this isn't all that different.
Not at all. Not at all. It isn't. Great story. She's actually on our board now at Liminal Space. Her name's Donna. She used to be a mother-baby nurse. And so for like decades, the joy of like helping parents meet their new child, right? Like the satisfaction that comes from that kind of work. Is there any, like, what a sacred workspace to be in, right? And one day she had to get a surgery on her hand, just some kind of routine surgery done. And the surgery didn't go well. And what it resulted in is she had to quit her job and go on disability. She was no longer allowed to serve in that role, because if you can't hold a baby and work in that, then, that's obviously a bit of a liability. So almost overnight, she went from doing a work for 20, 30 years that she loved to not being able to do that. And when I met her, she was trying everything, reading books about what to do next and following passions. And she was going to workshops and all kinds of things that were about figuring it out, technique-y kind of stuff. And when I met her, I realized, like, you have not been given permission to feel and experience the grief of what you no longer get to do. And when we stepped into that, just the wave of tears and emotion tied to that loss, and how crucial that was for her to be able to name and move through and have someone witness that, which is, I think, key. I think our sorrow in those kinds of endings becomes so much more holy when we bear witness to those things that are truly meaningful, and make it possible to move towards a next that holds life and not the illusion of life.
And that's why for me in my church work, and it's true for many of my colleagues, is that we feel that the work of doing memorial services, and I'm doing one next week, the work of doing that is far more meaningful in many ways than doing weddings.
Yeah.
And it's because people need the person to walk with and to be there with, and to help them shape what they want to do for that ending, that ritual of marking the ending, which is also a beginning. Yeah. And it's that it feels like it's much more important work in many ways from the leader's perspective, because it just feels far more meaningful to walk with people in the midst of their grief and their loss.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it makes the empty tomb and the new life that comes that much more meaningful, and the joy that much more deep for folks that have truly experienced what it means to grieve well. And again, grief, loss of any kind, career included. It makes the next thing that much more precious to hold. And of course, a big part of what is precious to hold is a person who believes in their inherent worth in spite of what they've gone through, that it's still true that their story matters, That is what moving into the next chapter is really, what it's really all about, is coming to terms with that and believing that and moving forward with that kind of undercurrent.
So our title today, how career transitions produce the best kind of life transition. Why? Why do career transitions make the best kind?
Well, careers, it's where we spend, a vast majority of our life, right? Hours of our day and week. It's where we create. And I think that word no longer should ever be just sequestered to the artists. Whether you're an accountant or working in a high rise somewhere or working as a plumber, we are all creating things. And there's something precious about that we need to acknowledge as we start talking about career transitions, that the things we create matter. If you are creating things that you feel do not matter, then it's time to have some serious, concentrated conversations regarding what does matter to you and what does it mean to faithfully move forward with the clues that you can identify there that do matter. And so when I think about career transitions, where you spend a vast majority of your life and you're trying to think about what gifts do I have and how do I bring those forward to the world? And when you begin to understand that this story is not about you, this career is not about you, and yet this life that we live, this story that's going on around us needs you to contribute in a very meaningful way. When you start to understand that, your life becomes more transformed. You become able to see that it's your life in the service of others, your life in the service of something much bigger than your 401k or the accolades you get on a resume. It becomes about your life contributing meaningfully to the betterment of others and making this world a better place. And so I think by engaging a career transition and doing the hard work of naming what are my gifts and strengths, how do I get to apply those in a context where they're meaningfully offered to those around me, and the stewardship of my life to keep faithfully moving into those questions that are about that stuff, that's gold. That's gold. And that produces the kind of, I think, like using that word we said earlier, the kind of joy tied to what it means to build a life worth living with this one precious life that you get.
That's right. One of my favorite poems is Mary Oliver. And she's got a line in one of her poems, what will you do with your one wild and precious life?
Yeah, right. And I'll just quote a line out of a poem, Everything is Waiting for You by David White, who's in town tomorrow, and I'm super excited to go see him. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. And I just love that, like, stay alert, stay hyper-vigilant, alert around what's going, like, lamp unto your feet. What are the clues right around you? They're not actually, though you might not be able to see them right now, they are there. What are the clues? Pay attention. Learn how to stay alert. Learn how to study your life.
I was interviewing someone recently on conscious business, the 5 P's of conscious business, and she was talking about how asleep at the wheel many of us are. Oh,
totally. Yeah, I think that's why maybe in some ways our culture loves zombie shows and zombie films. If you've ever watched The Walking Dead, I think it's exactly about what it means to live in a life where it feels like there's a lot of people who are asleep. And what does it mean to stay alive and be human?
But do you think there's a shift coming?
I do. I think we're in the midst of it on almost every level of society. I think we're feeling the pain of being awake. Like, it's kind of like when the light gets turned on and you've been asleep for 8 hours and you're like rubbing your eyes and you're like, stumbling and walking into things. I think that's happening right now. And in part, like, I am so excited and hopeful about what that means for us. Because again, if we look at this through the lens of transition, we get to really ask questions that might matter. And if we don't shut those questions down too quickly, we might actually build something that's better, both societally, individually, regionally, as a city. That's where transformation happens if we choose to stay in them. And so that's fun to think about, and really hard work. And we need more leaders that help us walk through that hard work.
Yeah, and that's the key, is to not do it by yourself, to have somebody walk with in all of this. I'm fortunate to be able to lead a friend of mine. Unfortunately, has to be with a very ill relative, and so I'm filling in for her on Sunday afternoon at a jazz vespers service. And there's a fantastic jazz group coming, and my job is to sort of find poems and prayers and things that readings that go along with it. But the whole theme of it is be the change.
Nice.
And so while I've been working on this, I've been thinking about just what you said. Everybody's got a part, and everybody is sort of waking up to the fact that we can all make a difference. And it's sort of this communal transformation that seems to be going on around us.
Totally.
That's great. So, Jon, what's your last piece of advice for people?
Well, when I start working with folks early on, I always begin with, what is the best approach for your life given the current circumstances of the transition that you're going through? What is the best approach to keep you present in the transition long enough to learn what it needs to teach you and form what it needs to form in you? So I think about that with folks on the front end, so that we can really think about, how do we keep you in the transition and not pull the ripcord too early. One of the ways I do that is through an assessment called the Liminal Strengths Assessment. You can find that on our website. For those of you that want to take that, if you use the coupon code JENN, JENN, you'll get 20% off as a gift from me to you all.
Lovely.
And what that really does is looks at 7 different things that are all about learning how to stay engaged and learn what you need to learn during the transition, such as dimensions related to community, taking risky action, self-care, self-honesty, your faith, the ability to plan, and resilience. So it looks at all 7 of those things as it relates to your transition, and helps you form a plan to move through it. That's one tool I think would be really helpful. I think the point, though, that I would really want to underscore is this isn't about, a spotlight onto your future to move through a career change or a transition. I think it's really about a lamp unto your feet. What are the clues immediately around you that, if you don't know how to see them, hire a pro or find people that have exceptionally good skills at listening and studying your life and offering insight, agenda-free. Anything that begins with, you know what you ought to do? That's
Run
a yellow
away.
flag. That's a yellow flag.
That's not coaching people.
No, not at all. But someone who can say, what would it mean to take the questions you're asking and keep asking them together, and I'll offer some observations and insights.
Right.
So pros can do that well, therapist, coach, faith leader, whomever, or a really good set of friends that can do that with you. I think that's just a powerful way to go through any kind of transition, especially career.
Good.
So that's where I would start.
Thank you. And where can people find out more about Liminal Space and more about you?
Well, you can check our website. It's in a liminalspace.org. You can also send me an email at john@inaliminalspace.org. Check the website, or check the show notes for the spelling of that.
Yeah.
Because that's not
Jon.
Jon, correct?
Yeah.
That would be the best way to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to talk with anybody.
Perfect. And we will have that on our show notes, episode 168 at careersbyjungcom. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts on transition and transformation with the listeners. And it's been great talking with you, Jon.
Yeah, you bet. It's been great. Thank you for having me, Jen.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jon DeWaal. All of his information, his contacts, social media, everything can be found over at careersbyjungcom. So come over to the website, check that out. If you're on Instagram, come to Careers by Jen on Instagram, and you will see my latest fun recycling project. I spent a whole bunch of time painting a bookcase this past weekend, an old wooden bookcase that my mother had gotten at a thrift store years and years ago. She had used it, didn't want it anymore, gave it to us. It spent many years in the basement as a bookcase, as it should be. And we're doing some renovating. We're doing some things around here. And I thought, what could I do with this bookcase? So I painted it with some old paint we had in cans underneath the basement stairs. And I turned it into a fabulous recycling center, because as I've mentioned once or twice, we are crazy recyclers in this house. And so if you want to take a look at the pictures that I've got on Instagram, come on over to Careers by Jen on Instagram, and you will see the painting in progress, and you will see what I did to make the recycling center afterwards. All right, take good care. I hope that you are more appreciative of transition as a type of opportunity. And thank you so much for listening to Careers by Jen. We'll talk soon.